Whether it be the silent grandeur of the sculpture of David or the haughty ideas presented in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, it is impossible to think of Michelangelo and not be amazed at his talent. Renaissance is the French word for rebirth, given to the period between the 14th and 17th centuries in Europe when there was a marked resurgence in classical art, education, philosophy, architecture, and natural sciences. Once more, the former Roman territories embraced the writings of ancient Greeks and Romans and the idea of humanism. This rebirth marks the end of the Dark Ages and the beginning of the long march toward modernity. During this time, many artists, poets, and authors contributed to the changing landscape of European art. At its heart, the Renaissance marked widespread stability that Europe had not known for centuries, coupled with an inevitable desire of people everywhere to learn and express themselves. Education and economic stability transformed Europe into a beacon of high culture that eventually led to the Enlightenment and the modern age. The 16th century brought an Italian polymath to the scene, one by the name of Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni, who might just be one of the most important of all Renaissance artists. Known simply as Michelangelo, this man could wield a pen, a paintbrush, and an architect's ruler with equal strength. Like the Medicis, Michelangelo's family gained their wealth as bankers in the 15th century, but eventually their financial business failed, and they moved outside of the city. After the death of his mother, young Michelangelo went to live with a nanny and her husband in the town of Settignano in Tuscany. There, in the shadow of his stonecutter father figure, the future builder and sculptor watched and learned the secrets of working with marble. Though he became a talented artist in various media, Michelangelo worked with marble throughout his entire career and favored it considerably. Sent to a humanist school in Florence, the boy was uninterested in Latin grammar and ancient scrolls. He became apprenticed to Domenico Ghirlandaio, one of the artists called to paint the walls of the Sistine Chapel, at the age of 13. Only 1 year later, Ghirlandaio agreed to pay Michelangelo as an artist. His work gained notoriety. Michelangelo quickly moved up in the world when Lorenzo de' Medici came to hire the two best students at Ghirlandaio's studio. At the tender age of 14, Michelangelo was whisked away to the Medici's Neoplatonic Humanist Academy. Under Lorenzo's care, Michelangelo was given a private room at the palace, fine clothes, and a generous salary that most artists would never secure for themselves. The young Michelangelo developed an ego at the new school that put him at odds with the other students. He felt that his work was superior to that of his peers, and his attitude resulted in a life-changing fistfight with one of the other boys at the academy. Michelangelo suffered a broken nose that healed crookedly. Humiliated at what he felt was a debilitating ugliness, the artist became even more passionate about producing perfection in his pieces. After Lorenzo died in 1492, Florence fell into political disarray. Evangelist Girolamo Savonarola incited hatred against the arts and, in particular, against the classical-style works depicting male nudes. Savonarola held regular bonfires of the vanities, in which he and his followers piled luxury items and artworks deemed inappropriate and set them alight. Priceless books, poems, and paintings were destroyed, along with mirrors, luxurious clothing, and anything considered vain, overtly sexual, or heretical in nature. Michelangelo was conflicted at the onslaught of anti-classical rhetoric. He was a faithful Catholic, but also an artist whose primary inspiration came from pagan Greek and ancient Roman works. This contradiction plagued him throughout his life and is made palpable in his poetry. So now, from this mad passion, which made me take art for an idol and a king, I have learnt the burden of error that it bore, and what misfortune springs from man's design. The world's frivolities have robbed me of the time that I was given for reflecting upon God. Unsure of what else to do, he left Florence and traveled to Venice before finding a commission for an angelic sculpture in Bologna. When the job was finished, he returned to Florence, poor and desperate to sell something quickly. It occurred to him that the money could be better found not in new works of art, but in antiques. So he used his talents to create beautiful classical-style works that he could pass off as early Roman or Greek. The first forgery Michelangelo produced was that of a sleeping marble cherub. Once the form was carved and perfected, the artist buried it in the dirt and probably employed various techniques to make the statue appear very old, at least 1,000 years old. Satisfied, he brought it to an art dealer and found a buyer. The statue was purchased by an important Roman cardinal who immediately summoned Michelangelo to Rome for a meeting. Understandably nervous, the artist asked if he could have the statue back if he returned the money. Cardinal Riario, however, declined the offer, explaining that he knew the cherub was a fake not because it did not look old, but because the pose was too modern. Michelangelo had put too much of his own perspective into the work to create a convincing forgery. Instead of being punished, he was offered a commission. Cardinal Riario wanted a brand new sculpture, of the artist's choosing, for his collection. Once more, Michelangelo's artistic personality landed him in trouble. He created a large likeness of the god Bacchus, Roman patron of wine, seemingly unbalanced and evidently inebriated. Again, the sculpture seemed to be a genuine piece of classical art at first glance. Still, the figure's lack of decorum seemed outright insulting to a patron of such standing. Riario refused to buy the statue, and the artist sold it instead to Jacopo Galli, the cardinal's banker. Despite the near disaster of his work with Bacchus, Michelangelo's name was growing in fame. He received more and more commissions and started to visit the marble quarry personally to choose his stone. During this time, he was commissioned to build a sculpture of the Virgin Mary by the envoy of King Charles VIII to the Pope. The only piece of work signed by its maker, the sculpture, commonly known as PIETÀ, depicts the Virgin Mary holding the body of Jesus after the crucifixion. It is widely regarded as a Renaissance masterpiece, perfectly encapsulating the ideals of classical beauty and naturalism. The depiction of the Virgin Mary was the cause of controversy. Some people took offense to the youthfulness of the Virgin Mary, whose face looked fresher and livelier than her son. There have been many interpretations to explain the motive of the sculptor. The most common interpretation dictates that her fresh face signifies purity and innocence. The best explanation comes from the horse's mouth, from Michelangelo, who explained to his biographer, Ascanio Condivi, "Do you not know that chaste women stay fresh much more than those who are not chaste? How much more in the case of the Virgin, who had never experienced the least lascivious desire that might change her body?" However, it was his next employer who would choose the giant block from which he would form his most famous statue, David. David was no small feat, and Michelangelo agonized over every detail. Determined to get every piece of the anatomy precisely correct, he broke into the church mortuary and dissected a dead man for a better understanding of the tendons, muscles, bones, and fat beneath the surface of the skin. David, a humble figure from the biblical story that pitted him against a giant, was commissioned by the Republic of Florence and displayed proudly in the main plaza. Michelangelo's version of David, the small man who defeated the giant Goliath, was a revolt against the artistic standards of the day. The large, defiant, nude statue towering at the height of a whopping 17 feet seems antithetical to the theme of the biblical story. But one need only consider the book of Samuel, chapter 17, verses 38 and 39. "And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him." According to most art historians, the sculpture shows David before his fateful encounter with Goliath. His body taut and vigorous, and his gaze focused. He is preparing to step into the battleground. The statue came to represent Florentine principles of humanism, republicanism, and artistic and literary freedom. In 1508, another of Michelangelo's most significant commissions was granted, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. His painting matched his sculpture for talent and realism. The 4-year period it took to complete the work solidified the artist's reputation as one of the great minds of the Renaissance. It stands there even today, surrounded by 8 other frescoes, Michelangelo's interpretation of Genesis. The figure of God reaching down to the mortal Adam immediately attracts the eye. There is some speculation about the inspiration behind these images. Some people believe that Michelangelo was inspired by a Christian hymn generally sung in Gregorian chant known as the VENI Creator Spiritus. This hymn was written by Rabanus Maurus, a 9th century Greek monk, in Latin. "Thou who art sevenfold in thy grace, finger of God's right hand, His promise teaching little ones to speak and understand." These lines and the imagery of God's right hand certainly inspire confidence in this theory. Whether this connection is real or imaginary, however, is not confirmed. The hand of God reaches out and bestows the gift of life upon the hunched mortal. Adam receives this breath of rejuvenation, this gift of life, without which he lay drab and lifeless. The two figures have also been interpreted as the two sides of European society. The church towers at the top, and the proletariat awaits the touch of life below. Over the years, the image of the two hands almost meeting in the middle has become ubiquitous. It has been reproduced for various purposes. While some reproduce it religiously, as a tribute, others do it for comedic effect. In any case, it has continued to move and inspire people in unique ways, and it still conjures an allure unlike any other. Finally, Michelangelo had the praise and fame he had desired since coming to study at Lorenzo de' Medici's academy. At 88, he died in Rome and was buried in Florence. Michelangelo is part of that small group of artists like Shakespeare, Tchaikovsky, and Beethoven whose works exalt a sense of universal harmony. The almost cosmic grandeur of his work was quite challenging to emulate. Still, over the centuries, the value of his work became increasingly apparent. He had a strong influence on Mannerism, Counter-Reformation, and even the Baroque period. Even modern sculptors like the great Auguste Rodin owe a huge debt to Michelangelo. Along with Da Vinci and Raphael, Michelangelo is regarded as a defining figure of the Renaissance movement. The ideas of humanism that evolved from this period went on to change the course of European culture and history. To learn more about the history of Michelangelo, check out our book, The Renaissance, a captivating guide to a remarkable period in European history, including stories of people such as Galileo Galilei, Michelangelo, Copernicus, Shakespeare, and Leonardo da Vinci. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All the links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.